This happened about 7 weeks ago, and I've completely changed how I handle package deliveries now. My name is Vanessa, and I'm a 29-year-old real estate agent living in Nashville. I work from home a lot, which means I'm constantly ordering things online. Office supplies, groceries, clothes, you name it. Amazon packages show up at my door probably 3 or 4 times a week. It's gotten to the point where I barely even think about it anymore. Just another part of the routine. I live in a townhouse in a pretty nice neighborhood. It's a quiet street, mostly young professionals and families. I've never had any issues with theft or anything like that. My neighbors are friendly, the area feels safe. So, when packages get delivered, I usually just let them sit on my porch until I have time to bring them in. This particular day was a Tuesday in early October. I'd ordered a few things over the weekend. A new laptop case, some skincare products, and a book I'd been wanting to read. The tracking information said everything would arrive on Tuesday between 2 and 6 p.m. I was home all day working, so I figured I'd just grab the packages whenever they showed up. Around 3 in the afternoon, I got a notification on my phone. Your package has been delivered. I glanced out my front window and saw a box sitting on my porch. Perfect. I was in the middle of a video call with a client, so I made a mental note to grab it after we finished. The call ended up running long, almost an hour. By the time I hung up, it was after 4. I went to the front door and opened it to get my package. The box was still there, but there was something else too, a handwritten note. It was tucked under the box, folded in half. I picked it up and unfolded it. The note said, in messy handwriting, "You should lock your door." I checked. It was unlocked. My stomach dropped. I immediately checked my front door. It was unlocked. I'd unlocked it that morning to let some air in and must have forgotten to lock it again. But who had checked it? And why would they leave a note about it? I looked at the box more closely. It was addressed to me. The label looked normal. Amazon logo, my name and address, tracking number. Everything seemed legitimate. I brought the box and the note inside and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking a little. I opened the Amazon app on my phone and checked the delivery details. It said the package had been delivered at 3:07 p.m. by a driver named Michael. There was a photo attached showing the box on my porch. Everything looked standard. But that note was not standard. I called my best friend Jasmine, told her what happened. She said it was probably just a driver trying to be helpful, letting me know I should be more careful about security. But something about the way the note was worded bothered me. I checked. Why would a delivery driver check if my door was locked? That seemed like overstepping. Jasmine said I should report it to Amazon just to be safe. I agreed. I went to the app and submitted a report about the incident. Described the note. Said I felt uncomfortable that a driver had tested my door. The automated response said someone would look into it and get back to me within 48 hours. I tried to go back to work but couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that note, about someone standing on my porch, putting down my package, and then trying my door handle. I got up and made sure all my doors and windows were locked. Then I checked the security footage from my doorbell camera. I watched the clip from 3:07 p.m. The video showed an Amazon delivery van pulling up. A driver got out wearing the standard Amazon uniform and carrying my package. He walked up to my porch, set down the box, and took the photo. Standard procedures so far, but then he did something that made my blood run cold. After taking the photo, he didn't leave. He stood there for a moment, looking at my front door. Then he walked up to it and reached for the handle. I watched him turn it slowly. The door opened slightly. He pushed it open a little wider, just enough to look inside. He stood there for maybe 5 seconds looking into my house. Then he closed the door, pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket, wrote something on it, and tucked it under my package. Then he walked back to his van and drove away. I felt sick. This wasn't a helpful driver leaving a friendly reminder. This was someone who had deliberately tested my door, opened it, looked inside my home, and then left a note about it. Why? What was he doing? Was he casing my house? Planning to come back later? I immediately called the police, explained the situation, and sent them the doorbell footage. They said they'd send an officer over to take a report. While I waited, I called Jasmine back and told her what I'd seen on the video. She said she was coming over. She didn't want me to be alone. The police arrived about 20 minutes later, 2 officers. I showed them the note and the doorbell footage. They watched it several times, taking notes. One of the officers said this was definitely suspicious behavior, and that I'd done the right thing by calling. They asked if I'd noticed anything else unusual recently. Any strange cars in the neighborhood, anyone watching my house. I said no, but I also admitted I didn't pay much attention to that kind of thing. They took the note as evidence and said they'd follow up with Amazon to identify the driver. They recommended I keep all my doors and windows locked, consider getting additional security measures like cameras for the back of my house, and be aware of anyone following me or watching me. That last part made me even more nervous. Jasmine arrived right after the police left. She insisted on staying with me for a few days. I was grateful. I didn't want to be alone. We spent the rest of the evening making sure my house was secure. Checked every lock, every window. I even ordered some additional security cameras online. The irony wasn't lost on me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every car that drove by made me get up and look out the window. Jasmine stayed in my guest room, and just knowing she was there helped a little. But I couldn't stop thinking about that driver standing in my doorway, looking into my house. The next day, Amazon called me, a supervisor from their delivery team. She apologized for what had happened and said they were investigating the incident. She asked me to send them the doorbell footage, which I did. She said the driver would be suspended pending the investigation and that they took these matters very seriously. 2 days later, the police called. They said they'd identified the driver from the Amazon records. His name was David Carpenter. He'd been working for Amazon for about 6 months. They'd brought him in for questioning. He claimed he was just trying to be helpful. Said he'd noticed my door was unlocked and wanted to let me know so I could secure my home. He said he looked inside to make sure no one had already broken in. The police said his story was plausible but still inappropriate. Opening someone's door without permission, even with good intentions, was a violation. They couldn't arrest him because he hadn't technically committed a crime. He hadn't stolen anything or threatened anyone. But they'd given him a warning and told him to stay away from my property. Amazon called me again the next day, said they'd completed their internal investigation. David Carpenter's employment had been terminated. They apologized again and offered me a credit on my account. I thanked them, but said I was more concerned about my safety than getting free shipping. The Amazon supervisor then told me something that made everything worse. During their investigation, they discovered that David had been flagged twice before by other customers for similar behavior. Once for leaving a note on someone's door with personal comments about their decorations. Another time for ringing a doorbell repeatedly, even though the customer had left instructions not to ring. Amazon had given him warnings both times, but hadn't terminated him until now. I asked why they'd let him keep working after those incidents. She said the previous complaints hadn't been as serious and didn't involve entering someone's property. I told her that wasn't good enough. That if they'd fired him after the first red flag, this wouldn't have happened to me. She apologized again, but didn't have much else to say. Over the next week, things seemed to calm down. No more weird notes, no more incidents. Jasmine eventually went back to her own apartment, though she checked on me daily. I started to feel like maybe it was over. Maybe David had learned his lesson and moved on. But then, 2 weeks after the original incident, something else happened. I got home from showing a property around 7 p.m. As I was pulling into my driveway, I noticed something on my porch. Another box. I hadn't ordered anything. I checked my Amazon account. No recent orders, no deliveries scheduled. I sat in my car for a minute, staring at the box. Something felt wrong. I called the police and asked if an officer could come check it out. They said they'd send someone. While I waited, I looked at my doorbell camera footage from that day. The box had been left at 5:30 p.m. The footage showed someone walking up to my porch and setting it down, but they weren't wearing an Amazon uniform. They were wearing regular clothes, jeans and a hoodie, and they'd kept their head down the entire time, face hidden by the hood. The police arrived and carefully examined the box. They asked if I wanted them to open it or call the bomb squad. I said I didn't think it was a bomb, but I didn't want to open it myself. One of the officers put on gloves and carefully opened it. Inside was nothing. The box was empty except for another note. The note said, "You're more careful now." Good, but locks only keep out honest people. My heart was racing. This was David. It had to be. He was trying to scare me, or worse, he was planning something. The officer took the note and the box as evidence. They said they'd talk to David again and possibly pursue charges for harassment or stalking. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not that night. I packed a bag and went to stay with Jasmine. I called my landlord and explained the situation. Asked if I could break my lease early. He was understanding and said we could work something out. The police visited David at his home. He denied leaving the box. Said he hadn't been anywhere near my house. They didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. The footage didn't clearly show his face. There were no fingerprints on the box or note. It was his word against circumstantial evidence. I moved out 3 weeks later. Got an apartment across town, different neighborhood, different delivery instructions. I even changed my name slightly on my Amazon account. Instead of Vanessa, I use V. Johnson. I don't want drivers to know if it's a man or woman receiving packages. I also never have packages delivered to my door anymore. Everything goes to an Amazon locker or my office. I won't risk having another stranger show up at my home with access to my address and schedule. The convenience isn't worth the fear. My realtor friends think I overreacted, that it was one bad experience with one bad employee. But they weren't there. They didn't see the footage of him opening my door. They didn't read those notes. They don't know what it's like to feel violated in your own home. The police never found enough evidence to charge David with anything. Last I heard, he was working for a different delivery service. Still out there, still going to people's homes, still having access to their addresses and schedules. That thought terrifies me. I'm telling you this because delivery drivers have more access to our lives than we realize. They know where we live. They know when we're home. They can see inside our houses if we leave doors or windows open. Most of them are good people just doing their jobs, but not all of them. And the companies they work for don't always protect us the way they should. Lock your doors, always. Even if you're home. Even if you're just stepping away for a minute. Install security cameras. Real ones, not just doorbells. And pay attention to who's delivering your packages. If someone makes you uncomfortable, report it immediately. Don't wait. I waited. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just trying to be helpful. But my instincts were right. Something was wrong. And if I'd acted on those instincts sooner, maybe I wouldn't have had to move. Maybe I wouldn't still be looking over my shoulder every time I see an Amazon van. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember that the people who come to your door know more about you than you think. This happened about 5 weeks ago, and it's made me completely paranoid about every delivery I receive now. My name is Trevor, and I'm a 34-year-old graphic designer living in Austin. I work freelance, which means I'm home most of the time. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of a newer complex. Pretty secure building. You need a code to get into the lobby. Cameras everywhere. I've always felt safe there. I order from Amazon constantly. Art supplies, tech equipment, random stuff I probably don't need. My apartment building has a package room where deliveries get left, and we get a notification when something arrives. It's a good system. Secure, convenient, no packages sitting outside getting stolen. This particular week, I'd ordered a new drawing tablet. It was expensive, around $800, so I was tracking it obsessively. The tablet was supposed to arrive on a Thursday. I'd been checking the tracking information all morning, refreshing it every few minutes like some kind of addict. Around 1 p.m., I got the notification. Package delivered to mailroom. I immediately went downstairs to get it. The package room was empty when I got there. Just rows of shelves with packages sorted by apartment number. I found mine quickly. There was one box sitting on my shelf. The size looked about right for a tablet. I grabbed the box and brought it back upstairs to my apartment. Set it on my desk and grabbed scissors to open it. But before I cut into it, something made me pause. The label looked slightly off. The printing was a little blurry. The address was correct, but the font seemed different than usual Amazon labels. I checked the tracking number on the label against the tracking number in my Amazon app. They didn't match. This wasn't my tablet. I looked at the label more closely. It was addressed to me, to my apartment number. But it wasn't from Amazon. There was no Amazon logo. It was from some company I'd never heard of. Something called Starlight Deliveries. I sat there staring at the box, confused. I hadn't ordered anything from Starlight Deliveries. I'd never even heard of them, but the box was definitely addressed to me. I carefully opened it, half expecting it to be a mistake or maybe something my mom had sent me. Inside was another box, a product box for some kind of security camera system, but it wasn't sealed. I opened the inner box and found, instead of cameras, a bunch of random items. Some old magazines, a broken phone, a handful of USB drives, and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded the paper. It was a printed document, a list of names and addresses, about 20 of them. I scanned the list and felt my heart skip. My name was on it, my address. But so were other names from my building, people who lived on different floors. Some names I recognized from seeing their packages in the mailroom. At the bottom of the list was a handwritten note. It said, "These people order expensive items regularly. Coordinate with delivery schedule. Replace items before pickup." I read it 3 times, trying to understand what I was looking at. This was a theft operation. Someone was tracking residents in my building who ordered expensive items, intercepting their real packages and replacing them with fake boxes. Then, presumably, they were keeping or selling the real items. My mind raced. Where was my tablet? Had someone already taken it? I checked the tracking information again. It said delivered at 12:53 p.m. But the box I'd received wasn't my tablet. Someone had swapped it. I immediately went back downstairs to the package room. Checked my shelf again, nothing else there. I asked the building concierge if any other packages had come for me. He checked the system and said no. just the one delivery that had been logged at 12:53. I went back to my apartment and called Amazon, explained the situation. The customer service rep seemed confused, said the tracking showed the package had been successfully delivered, and there was a photo to prove it. She sent me the photo. It showed a box on a shelf in what looked like my building's package room. The label was visible in the photo. It was my tablet. The correct tracking number, the correct address. But that box wasn't in the package room when I'd gone down. Someone had taken it and replaced it with the fake box. I told the Amazon rep about the list I'd found, about the note, about the theft operation. She said she'd escalate this to their investigations team and that I should file a police report immediately. I called the police, explained everything. They said they'd send officers over. While I waited, I looked at the USB drives that had been in the fake box. I was nervous about plugging them into my computer. They could have malware or viruses, but I was also curious about what might be on them. I grabbed an old laptop I barely used anymore, one that didn't have any important files on it, and plugged in one of the USB drives. It took a minute to load. When it did, I found a folder full of photos. Hundreds of them. Screenshots of Amazon orders, tracking information, delivery schedules, and photos of packages in mail rooms. Not just my building, multiple buildings across Austin. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the files. This was way bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just someone stealing packages from my building. This was an organized operation hitting multiple locations. The photos were dated going back several months. I also found a spreadsheet. It listed items that had been stolen, their estimated values, and where they'd been sold. The total value was in the tens of thousands of dollars. Electronics, jewelry, designer clothes, collectibles. Anything expensive that could be resold quickly. The police arrived about 30 minutes after I'd called. 2 officers. I showed them everything. The fake box, the list, the USB drives, the files I'd found. They looked at each other with serious expressions. One of them said this was bigger than a simple package theft. This was organized retail crime. They'd need to involve detectives. Over the next few hours, more people showed up. Detectives, someone from the property management company, even a representative from Amazon's investigations team. They asked me a million questions. When had I noticed the package? Who had access to the mailroom? Had I seen anyone suspicious? I told them everything I could remember. The mailroom was only accessible to residents and staff. You needed a code to get in. But delivery drivers also had temporary access codes that changed weekly. If someone had figured out the system, they could potentially access the mailroom without being a resident. The detectives examined the security camera footage from the mailroom. At 12:53 p.m., an Amazon driver entered and placed a package on my shelf. The box clearly showed my address and the correct tracking label. At 1:02 p.m., someone else entered the mailroom. They were wearing an Amazon uniform and carrying a scanner, but they weren't the same person who delivered my package. This second person went directly to my shelf, took my package, and replaced it with a different box. Then they left. The detective said the second person was wearing a fake uniform. The scanner they were carrying was just a prop. They'd entered the mailroom using what appeared to be a legitimate access code, swapped the packages, and walked out. The whole thing took less than 2 minutes. But here's what really got them. The security footage from the building's front entrance didn't show this second person entering or leaving. They'd somehow bypassed the main entrance. The detectives checked other camera angles and found that the person had entered through the garage. They'd tailgated behind a resident's car when the gate opened, walked up the internal stairs to the mailroom level, done the swap, and left the same way. The property management rep looked mortified. He kept apologizing, saying they'd improve security, add more cameras, change the access codes more frequently. but the damage was already done. The detectives contacted other buildings on the list I'd found. Turned out, similar thefts had been happening at those locations too. Residents had reported packages missing or receiving empty boxes. But no one had connected the dots until now. No one had found evidence of the operation like I had. The detective asked me how I'd ended up with the evidence box. I said I didn't know. It didn't make sense. Why would the thieves accidentally give me a box full of incriminating evidence? The detective said it probably wasn't an accident. Someone in the operation had made a mistake or had gotten sloppy. Or maybe someone wanted to get caught. Maybe there was internal conflict in the group. Over the next week, the investigation expanded. The detectives traced the USB drives and found more information. IP addresses from where the files were created. Email addresses associated with online marketplaces where stolen items were being sold. They identified at least 3 people involved in the operation. One of them was an Amazon driver. He'd been providing delivery schedules and access codes to the others. Another was a former employee of the property management company that ran my building and several others. He'd kept his access to internal systems even after being fired, and had been using that information to coordinate thefts. The third person was someone with no prior connection to deliveries or property management. Just a guy who saw an opportunity and got involved. All 3 were arrested. The detectives recovered some of the stolen items from a storage unit they'd been using. My tablet was there, still in its original packaging. I got it back about 2 weeks after the initial incident. Amazon also refunded my money even though the item was recovered, which was nice of them. But here's what really messed me up. The detective told me that I'd been specifically targeted. The note on the list, the one that said to coordinate with my delivery schedule, had a star next to my name. When they interviewed the suspects, one of them admitted that they'd been watching me for weeks. They knew my routine, knew when I was home, knew what I ordered and when. The former property management employee had access to lease information, which included employment details and income estimates. They'd been targeting residents they thought could afford expensive items and wouldn't make too much fuss about a missing package. Young professionals, single people living alone, people who worked from home and ordered frequently. I was their ideal target, and I'd been on their radar for at least 2 months before they actually stole from me. The thought of being watched, being studied, being selected made my skin crawl. I'd been going about my daily life completely unaware that someone was planning to rob me. The detective said I was lucky. Lucky that I'd noticed the fake label. Lucky that the thieves had made a mistake and given me the evidence box. Lucky that I'd called the police instead of just assuming it was a delivery error. If I hadn't done those things, the operation would have continued. More people would have been victimized. I moved out of that apartment 2 months later. Not because the building wasn't secure, they'd actually upgraded everything after the incident. New cameras, new access systems, staff training on how to spot suspicious activity. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I walked to the mailroom, I'd wonder if someone was monitoring me. Every time I ordered something online, I'd worry about it getting stolen. I live in a house now. Single-family home with a locked mailbox and a covered porch. I have my own security cameras, and I don't use the Amazon app anymore. I order through my computer so I can use a VPN and mask my location data. Maybe that's overkill, maybe I'm being paranoid, but after what happened, I don't care. I'm telling you this because package theft is getting sophisticated. It's not just porch pirates anymore. It's organized groups with inside information, fake uniforms, detailed target lists. They know where you live, what you buy, when you're home, and they're counting on you not noticing until it's too late. Check your labels carefully. Make sure the tracking numbers match. If something feels off, Trust that feeling. And if you live in an apartment building, get to know your neighbors. Watch out for each other. Report suspicious activity immediately. The people stealing packages aren't just opportunistic criminals anymore. They're organized, patient, and strategic. They'll watch you for weeks or months before making a move. And by the time you realize something's wrong, they've already moved on to the next target. Don't be an easy target. Pay attention, stay alert. And remember that sometimes the thing that looks like a delivery is actually something much more dangerous. I learned that lesson in my apartment mailroom on a Thursday afternoon in October, and I'll never forget it.